like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. Our Neighbor's Choice is live. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gurnosky. So glad to be with you again for our program. Streaming on video stream on Facebook, YouTube, and all podcast platforms, as well as our FM and AM radio affiliates. And we're ready to go to challenge toxic groupthink, as we always do together. I saw this post by Dr. Frank Lipman, MD. We have a lot of doctors and bold visionary thinkers and Galileos who come onto the program to challenge sacred cows that hold us back and hold our bodies back. But I haven't had Frank Lipman, MD, on yet, but I saw this post by him and I thought I'd share it. It says, food is more than just calories. It's information that tells your entire biology what to do and when to do it. And junk food is like malware on your computer, scrambled information that leads to a major hardware crash. Food made by an industrial, man-made manufacturing. And I think it's a great way to put it. You know, I thought it's kind of interesting in our modern world, we have to use computer analogies to sink in, you know, the gravity and the reality of what our food does to us when we eat industrial goop and processed foods, the seed oils, the processed flour, processed sugar. It's such a bad combination to have as a regular feature in your daily living, because the correlation you see between those things and the rise of these chronic illnesses that happen to be these comorbidities for this novel virus. It's just, the strong evidence is very, very compelling. And the way people feel when they get these things out of their life and they get back to more ancestral eating and they ignore so much of the garbage coming on from the food pyramid and things like that, they can reclaim their life after decades of pain of autoimmune disorders and mood issues and chronic illnesses. They can just go away very quickly. We've seen people get off of diabetes medications and get off problems with their heart, reverse, very deadly diseases just by rejecting the food pyramid's bad advice and the junk food that goes along with that subsidized food industry that we have. That's what we want to see more of. We want to see people take back the dignity and their freedom and their health. So important to have that. I also want to make mention today that we've heard of the passing of the great Dr. Walter E. Williams. I got to have several conversations with Dr. Walter Williams and had him on our radio program, on this program, A Neighbor's Choice, and talked to him earlier this year even. And he was always a great inspirational figure. He had a great story of overcoming adversity, and he was a great critic of the crony corporatist system we have, the central bank rigging of the economy with the Federal Reserve, what it does to hurt poor people and those on fixed incomes the most, including seniors. And so it's sad to see of his passing. But he did have a great, great impact in world affairs and our current events and our understanding of economics and philosophy. And he understood the danger of centralized power. He understood the dangers of prohibitionism. He was a critic of the war on drugs, the nanny state, which are basically the same thing. He was a critic of endless wars in our empire that serves globalist interests and hurts the little person. So I think Walter Williams is a great role model for liberty, is a champion for liberty. So, it's a sad thing to see his passing, but it's also great memories of his work that has inspired a lot of people to explore the ideas of liberty and freedom, peace, nonviolence, understanding how economics can work as a win-win solution for everyone. So it's a sad day. I wish that we could have, more proper conversations about these ideas without them always being so politicized. And every time someone who's not on the left-wing religious platform, every time they get sick or die, you hear so many awful rude comments and stuff like what they said about Herman Cain when he passed. They don't indict the food pyramid that we've all been tricked by, that has caused so many people to have lethal cases of coronavirus. No, they just use people passing or people being ill to try to make political points or whatever. And I'm not saying that's happening here with Walter Williams. I'm just saying in general, it would be great to see some decency and some humanness return, the best of humanity, when we think about life and we think about the importance of cherishing life and not being, flippant with life as if it's expendable and just a game to play. So we are reflecting on the passing of Walter Williams today, and we really honor his contribution to the world of economics in critiquing ridiculous, amoral foreign policy. What happened to the left-wing critique of war? That's something that you don't see. We need to see a return to that. How can you be anything progressive if you're in service to perpetual war and war for profit? Brad online on our Facebook video stream says, any food acts as a sort of drug, making us happy or sad, full of energy or low on energy, etc. Fast foods act like hard drugs on your system. Crash and burn, up and down, hit you harder and faster, etc. That's a very good point. And that's something that we've learned more about with recent guests that we've had on the program over the years. Folks like Dr. Chris Palmer, Harvard psychiatrist, who's using ketogenic therapy, getting people on ketosis. And he's finding significant effect in improving people's cases of depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and other things. And that's exciting to see that. People who he wasn't able to get much help with their current medications, he was able to have tremendous impact with just getting them into ketosis. And that needs to be explored more. Is it the absence of seed oils, perhaps, that's being incorporated into that turnaround, or is it the absence of processed flour? Is it the presence of ketosis? What's going on there? That needs to be investigated more to figure out what that effect could be. Because, like Brad said, food acts as a sort of drug, making us happy or sad, full of energy, low on energy. Very true. And we don't realize, how much unknown, we could explore in trying to figure out, okay, if you have moods and attitude problems and conflict, how much of that could be related to the foods that we consume, as well as other environmental effects. But that's certainly an interesting thing. Brad also says, rest in peace, Walter. Williams. His legacy of knowledge will live on. I'm sure he's looking at us now with the same beautiful smile on his face. Yeah, he was always a classy guy to talk to. I really enjoyed his comments in my interviews and discussions with him off air. So, let's hope that we can have many, many more figures who can inspire liberty for generations to come and defend and advance the protection of the human person. Because life is sacred and we need people who can be cultivated as role models in our society that realize that. And that's an important thing. So you're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski. We're going to take a quick break and return after these short messages. Stay tuned. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLSID 1492187, Equal Housing Lender.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less, delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. FastFreshSeafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Gronowski. I'm a neighbor just like you, looking to figure out the world with fresh perspective, with a perspective that motivates us and inspires us to do great things. And, I got to tell you, the news has been really kind of negative, to say the least. And I want to deal with it as it is, and not just hide from it. And read about stories of cats being rescued from trees. All those are great. But we have to deal with, the dominant zeitgeist chatter going on. But we also have to keep a bigger perspective in mind, so as to not get caught up in the melee, the madness of the crowd. The crowd is what the news media knows all about. The crowd is what they talk about. That's their specialty. Look at this story here in foxnews.com. New York City bar owner handcuffed and taken away for allegedly defying coronavirus rules. The business could face fines of as much as $10,000 a day, according to a report. So he's a co-owner of a New York City tavern, was taken away from the business in handcuffs Tuesday night, accused of defying state and city mandates related to the coronavirus pandemic. 5 city sheriff officers showed up at Mac's Public House in Staten Island and arrested co-owner Danny Presti, the State Island Advance reported. In many communities across the U.S., owners of bars, restaurants, and other businesses have been complaining that some coronavirus rules have become too draconian, imperiling their ability to earn revenue and keep employees working. Many politicians and health officials, meanwhile, have argued that drastically reducing public gatherings and interactions is the best way to combat the spread of the virus and get the economy fully restored more quickly. So, that's an example of kind of the tyranny that we're just trying to become normalized to. And I don't think we should allow it to be normal. It should never be the new normal that this is acceptable. We talked about earlier this week a Canadian journalist staking out a position near the bushes of a church to count how many people were in there so she could report them to the government. Then you have a man getting arrested and put in handcuffs because he's running his restaurant. He's doing what I believe are freedoms that are not for government to take. And our country was founded on the notion that there are freedoms that are inalienable to our human nature and that they're not created by government, and that government should be restrained at all costs to never be allowed to abridge those freedoms. And the right to be able to, run your business, I think, is something that government was never intended to have that kind of influence over. And again, they can say all day long they're doing it for health, but look what they do. I'm sure Cuomo's getting nice food. I'm sure he's hanging out with a lot of people. He's doing what he wants, just like the California governor, Newsom, was going over to the French Laundry, and everybody who's somebody in that little clique is going over to the French Laundry fine restaurant, having wonderful, expensive, high quality, exotic food. But meanwhile, everybody else, you get carted off in handcuffs if you run your pub in Staten Island. We're not going to accept this normal. This is not going to be normal. We're not going to normalize this. We're not going to allow people to succumb to nanny state fervor. What this whole political thing has exposed is that the public has become decadent and has become forgetful of what liberty is all about and what fighting for the rights of the individual is all about. When you remove protections for the individual, anything can become a tyrannical law. What I mean by that is, once you say, hey, the government can use the initiation of state violence for any action that's nonviolent, it becomes just a matter of time before any event can be used as the excuse to cart someone off for running a pub, cart somebody off for going to church, cart somebody off because they're at a park that they paid for with their money, with their family. That's the kind of insanity that you get. And then it becomes normalized. Then it becomes something that continues into our lives. Just like we were told with 9/11, we have to do these certain things, but now they become institutions in and of themselves. The Patriot Act, the TSA, patting down grandma and so forth, giving free lymphatic massages to people who are not doing anything wrong, treated like suspects. Then you have Department of Homeland Security. You have all these different bureaucrats that come in there and they make so much money because it's so easy. Why work hard for a living when you can go work in a bureaucracy and hand out millions of other people's dollars to your friends and have a nice lucrative pension and get a revolving door, job when you get out into the private sector at a lobbying firm or an industry association or a law firm or something. And there's just too much easy money. And that's the human nature proclivity, is to take when you give people absolute power, somebody's going to walk around and grab it and start using it. So what's it going to be? Are we going to learn this lesson? Or is this something that other civilizations outside of America are going to have to pick up the ball and run with in history? Will America learn this lesson? How important liberty is for every human person? How it's not to be negotiated and negotiable because of fear? Will we learn that lesson? Or is it going to be up for other cultures and societies and nations to pick up the ball of freedom and move it down the court in history? Is America's rendezvous with liberty about up? Or will we have a renaissance? Liberty requires having a nonviolent, peaceful society, not having vindictive, petty, envy-driven society. So it requires two things to get liberty going again. You have to have virtue. That means you got to repent of awful behaviors and corrupt practices in our social lives and in our political lives, societal lives. And then you also have to have physical progress. You have to have growth. You have to have generation of advancement in technology. See, I don't, there's an argument that some people say that, well, if you believe that, creating revolutions in technology and energy and getting rid of pollution and getting rid of chronic illnesses, that's if you believe those things are going to help us, well, then you're a materialist. You just think everything's about, matter and, stuff and atoms or whatever. I don't really buy that because, again, if we look at the Genesis story, God creates man and he gives man a mandate to be co-creators in the image of how he creates, that human beings are meant to create with the created order as our sandbox. That's our original mission. That's not a side small section 400 in a manual. That's the big mission. And what Jesus does is he comes into history and he brings us back to that original mission by guiding us back away from the error, guiding us back away from the lie of scapegoating, because that's how societies solve problems up until Jesus' time. They created a blame machine. They targeted someone who could be blamed for problems, and everybody got their wrath and their anger and their resentment out on that common enemy. But what Christianity did is it said, no, that's not going to solve problems, because that person's not really, if you destroy that person, well, they weren't really to be the blame. That we have to self-sacrifice our privilege of wanting to be the winners and the victors in every argument and every conflict, and learn to be more mature. And if we do that, then we can step back, and instead of sacrificing someone or blaming someone whenever there's a calamity or a problem that frustrates us, we can innovate and create win-win solutions. And that's where technology is advanced. That's where science and understanding is advanced. And then when we have those things, it lifts up everybody. It helps everybody have a better life. So that linear aspect of history is what Christianity brought to the table. That we can actually go somewhere. That we can actually make something of this world and make it more beautiful in the end by our contributions to it in our time. That mission perspective is something we need to recover very quickly and very deeply in our hearts if we want the society I think we all want. We'll be back in just a second.
Ronald Reagan would turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040, WHBO.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer are backing a $908 billion pandemic relief bill. The measure, sponsored by a bipartisan group of lawmakers, is the first sign of movement on the matter in months. President-elect Biden talking about the impact of COVID-19 with small business owners.
When I think about the economy, I don't think about the gross domestic product or the state of the stock market. I think about families like yours, family like mine.
Mr. Biden promising help is on the way. The head of the CDC says now to February will be the most difficult time in the public health history of our nation.
Right now, we unfortunately have a pandemic that's really throughout the nation, and there really isn't that resilience of healthcare capacity to be able to be shifted.
Dr. Robert Redfield anticipates up to 200,000 additional deaths by February. The UK expected to start distributing Pfizer and BioNTech's COVID vaccine next week. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Our Neighbor's Choice is back. Listener online says threatening to take a liquor license is very tricky legally because they are actually bought and sold, often individually, from the business itself. You can pay up to $500,000 for a license. You might get a license if you jump through the right hoops, which consists of fundraising for the right people. I've seen that done locally, although the normal way is to buy one outright. And the states can just take them away if you refuse to bankrupt your business with these shutdowns. How horrible is that? And again, these bad laws are baked into our society because we're not, passing down vigilance and wisdom about how important it is to imitate Jesus and respect people's human personhood. Jesus said God desires mercy, not sacrifice. He says, do not resist evil with violence. That includes the evil of the various nonviolent actions that are being criminalized left and right all around us because of a contagion of fear. Here's a story at AmericanGreatness.com. They've published some of my work. U.S. Postal Service contractor says his trailer with 130,000 to 280,000 mail-in ballots disappeared in Lancaster. In a press conference Tuesday, 3 whistleblowers made a series of stunning allegations against election officials and U.S. Postal Service workers, accusing them of illegal activity undermining the integrity of the election. The most extraordinary report came from a U.S. Postal Service contractor who said he transported thousands of completed ballots for the 2020 general election from Bethpage, New York to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where the trailer carrying the ballots disappeared. Former Kansas Attorney General Phil Klein said that the contractor's eyewitness testimony has been corroborated and shows that between 130,000 to 280,000 completed ballots for the 2020 general election were lost. The Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society, led by Klein, mounted an independent investigation into the voting irregularities in several battleground states. The whistleblower accounts released today detail the failure of election officials in blue jurisdictions to maintain ballot chain of custody, allowing for the potential infusion of fraudulent ballots. I mean, if this is true, this is below, there's no way this can be, something that people just dismiss and move on. If this alone here is beneath the dignity of serious people or moral people, this is if this story alone, not to mention all the others that are coming in, and none of them are televised. Remember they say that saying that the revolution will not be televised. Well, that's true. The revolutionary exposure of the fraud of our democracy is certainly not televised. You had the Project Veritas coming out with CNN recordings of their discussions about how important it is for them to not give much of a platform about Trump contesting the election. And it's like, who are you and why do you think that we still think you're news? You're not news. You're PR firms for powerful corporations and bureaucrats that like the status quo of corporate welfare, mass incarceration, and endless war. All of those things the rest of the public hates. But you don't want to let off of your little prison industrial complex, your war industrial complex, and your corporate welfare industrial complex. Media makes too much money off of it. They like the power, and they ultimately like the worship of the state that is their God. The article goes on to say the whistleblower accounts released today detail the failure of election. Okay, we said that already. Klein presented some of the group's findings during the press conference. The way that they did this election was not consistent with federal law in every one of these urban areas in every one of these swing states. And the question is why? Computer expert Gregory Stenstrom, a U.S. Navy veteran and data scientist from Pennsylvania, said he personally witnessed a vendor of Dominion machines and local election officials download and update counting machines in violation of election system protocol. Stenstrom said he witnessed the voting machine warehouse supervisor for Delaware County carrying around unsealed and unsecured baggies of USB cards, which he inexplicably began to plug into vote counting computers and uploaded into the official vote tally. He said that despite his formal objections to law enforcement officials and election board officials, the supervisor was allowed to continue this highly suspicious activity. When he was finished, the vote count shot up 50,000 votes for Vice President Biden. Stenstrom said he went on to allege that 64 USB cards used during the November 3rd election have gone missing. He said he was finally able to gain access to the sequestered room 3 days later, where he witnessed 60 to 70,000 unopened mail-in ballots. That was on Thursday after the election at 3:30. They remain unaccounted for. We don't know where they are. Stenstrom has previously asserted that as many as 120,000 votes cast in Delaware County should be called into question. Ethan Pease, a U.S. Postal Service whistleblower from Madison, Wisconsin, said he wasn't political, but something profoundly wrong had happened in the 2020 election. Pease alleged that he was told by postal workers on 2 separate occasions that the post office on November 4th was planning to backdate tens of thousands of mail-in ballots to show that they were received before the November 3rd election. U.S. Postal Service whistleblowers in Michigan and Pennsylvania have also alleged that they witnessed the backdating of ballots. Jesse Morgan, a U.S. postal subcontractor, said that he had nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward. As Klein had noted when he was introducing him, Morgan had an arrest record from his younger days, and the media was starting to focus on that rather than his allegations. Until now, Morgan's 3 children were unaware of his arrest record. The truck driver was determined to get the truth out anyway. He said that his route goes from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Bethpage, New York, to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and back to Lancaster. On October 21st, Morgan noted that when he arrived for his usual route in Bethpage, New York, an expediter told him that he would be hauling ballots. The driver said he saw a total of 24 Gaylords, these are large cardboard containers of ballots, loaded into his trailers. These Gaylords contain plastic trays. I call them totes or trays of ballots stacked on top of each other. All the envelopes were the same size. I saw the envelopes had return addresses. They were complete ballots, he said. Morgan added that the envelopes were all the size and he could see handwritten return addresses. When he got to Harrisburg, Morgan Morgan said that he wasn't allowed to unload, and he ended up parked for 6 hours from 9:15 a.m. till 3 p.m. Finally, he went inside the facility to see what's going on. He said he was told to wait for the transportation supervisor, which he noted was weird. 16 months I've been doing this, and I've never had to talk to the transportation supervisor for the U.S. Postal Service, Morgan said. Normally, he explained, he talks with the expediter if he has a problem. The supervisor told him to haul the ballots to Lancaster, which made no sense to him because he knew they were supposed to be shipped to Harrisburg. Before he left, Morgan said he tried to obtain a ticket and an overtime slip showing the hours he was in Harrisburg, the name of his expediter, and other details so he could get paid for the extra hours and would be able to prove when he got to Lancaster that he wasn't the person who screwed this up. A ticket is always provided to a driver when he shows up at the U.S. Postal Service facility that proves you were there, he explained. The transportation supervisor refused to give me a ticket and told me to leave. I then demanded he give me a late slip since I wanted to get paid for the time I was sitting there. Morgan said the supervisor refused to give him that too. He was kind of rude and wouldn't explain anything to me. He went on to say that he drove to Lancaster and unhooked his trailer in its usual place and then drove his truck to where he always parked in a nearby lot. The next day, he said, his trailer was gone. Klein said the Amistad Project has reached out to U.S. attorneys in Pennsylvania and New York to look into the situation. They put the ballots on the wrong truck and they picked the wrong man, Klein said, because here you have a man who is willing to tell the truth and about what that load is. So, these are stories that I think demand investigation and exploration. And we're going to talk about them regardless of what the media says we're allowed to talk about. As I've told you before, I don't care if Facebook or YouTube, they say, oh, we're going to punish you if you say something we don't like. It doesn't matter. People build millions and millions of followers on podcasts, on radio, and we're on both. We don't need those social media platforms. Those are cherry on top for us. We don't care about them. They don't mean anything to us. Here's a story in the nationalpulse.com. Soros-linked Smartmatic chairman admits technology is licensed from Dominion. Despite voter tech firm Smartmatic's insistence that it has no affiliate relationships or financial ties with foreign-owned Dominion voting systems, the company chairman has previously admitted during interviews that part of our technology is licensed from Dominion. The comments came from Smartmatic company chairman Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who enjoys intricate financial relations and a famous friendship with leftist mega donor George Soros. During a June 2015 interview with Philippine news outlet ABS-CBN, Lord Malloch Brown admitted, yes, part of our technology is licensed from Dominion. The news will raise further questions as to why both Dominion and Smartmatic have gone to recent lengths to distance themselves from one another following allegations of corruption during the 2020 U.S. elections. Recently, the pair claimed they were competitors in order to deflect from the idea that their technologies were both used to defraud people in the United States. The National Poll soon after revealed that the companies actually have a non-compete agreement. So, this kind of reminds me of when they created the Federal Reserve, and they came out, the folks who wanted to create the Federal Reserve Act, and they came out and wrote ads to the papers attacking the Federal Reserve because they knew that their reputation of being cartel and oligarchic in their behavior would rally the average populist public to support the Fed. Because if they wrote ads saying, oh, look, we're against it, oh, this is going to be terrible for us, that would make the public think, well, hey, those guys are crooks. If they're against it, we should be for it. And you kind of see that it sounds like a little bit what's going on here, where they come out, oh, yeah, we have nothing to do with each other. We're not connected at all. We're just, and then you find out in past interviews, they're talking about sharing licensed technology together. And meanwhile, again, what is it? 96%, 94% of Dominion's employees donated or 96% of the political donations that Dominion voter employees made was to Democrat people. So it tells you they have a kind of culture, have a specific culture. And again, it's not a beat to imagine that folks who are being told every day that their opponent is a foreign asset akin to Hitler, that they would feel like they could do extraordinary things in their view, to do great things for history, to fulfill the conclusions of their hallucination that they share with others. Another story that I'll just read the headline from is in the nationalpulse.com. Whistleblowers dispute over 1 million ballots, cite Dominion tampering, shipping filled ballots across state lines. So this is kind of a encapsulation of the stories we've been looking at. But again, these things demand investigation. If we're going to have a democracy, you've got to be able to know what the crowd wants. I am not very excited about relying on crowd majority contests to decide what we're going to do, because they don't know. Groups by their nature tend to not do what's in the interest of every human person. They tend to get swept up into emotional storms, left, right, this way, that way. Have you ever seen, the play by Shakespeare about Julius Caesar? Remember that whole story? 1 minute they want to go this way, the next minute the crowd goes the other way based on the latest speech. Not a great way to do a society that way. You can have local limited use of democracy for small things, but not really a big effective tool for getting to the truth and advancing the rights of the minority, which is always what's at stake and being demolished whenever you have a crowd deciding what we're going to do. But it's even worse when you have these crowd rituals and we don't even know the count in any legit way, because then you have this appearance of mass buy-in for these policies of the state. And if there's dubious evidence that even the crowd wasn't really buying into this stuff, but yet they're told, no, you signed off for this, for voting for this in massive amounts, that's going to create a recipe for societal decay, the likes of which I don't think we're prepared to realize. We've got to get this stuff right. We've got to have a return to our local communities, a return to our families being pro-family, pro-community, that's local. Decentralization is the key, and just saying no to the false lie of sacrificial violence. That is where we begin to make the right moves for the future. We'll take a quick break after these short messages. I'm David Granosky. Stay with us.
Hello, this is David Granosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. Thank you for listening. If you're listening to our FM or AM radio affiliates, make sure you save it to that station because that's where we come to you every day. If you want to find our articles and our online-only podcast, go to aneighborschoice.com. And by the way, if you're listening and you came to us and found us from Dave Smith's podcast or Michael Malice, let us know in the comments. We love seeing all these interesting new faces and friends joining us on this discussion. We are a radio program, but we're making more and more of a presence in the online world. The podcast world is something that we continue to build on. And we love seeing our international listeners and people that have so many great comments, always some of the most interesting discussions you can look for. So I'm looking at some of the comments here as we build this. Again, I'm always a little bit iffy about YouTube and Facebook because, again, I look at radio legends like Rush Limbaugh. They build 15, 20 million people. They don't have to worry about YouTube algorithms. I kind of like that. That's why I've spent time in radio building these affiliates in major markets across the land as we build it one by one. But I do want to have a foot in YouTube and Facebook since so many people use these platforms, as long as the little robot algorithms will have us. And I know that YouTube is really scared about a message that's pro-peace. They're scared about a message that's really going to solve pollution by empowering market solutions. We have the folks who are doing cutting-edge work in nuclear fusion on this program. We have the folks doing cutting-edge work in challenging the status quo for chronic illnesses. People like Dr. Thomas Seyfried at Boston College, who's doing revolutionary Galileo-type work on the metabolic theory of cancer. These are huge things. And the Luddites among us, and I mean that seriously, because they're against technology, they're against peace, they're against prosperity, they're against diversity of thought, at least their little algorithms that reflect their worldview are, they're scared to death of this stuff. So we don't need Facebook and YouTube. We'll build millions of people in our own platforms. We don't need them, but we'll be here as long as they'll allow us to have a little presence here. But looking at some of the comments real quick, we have some folks talking about my podcast interview that was online only with Curtis Yarvin, which you can find on aneighborschoice.com or our podcast feed. Just search for Curtis Yarvin, David Granosky, you'll find it. And that was a fun episode. It's called The Glorious Yeast Infection of Christianity. And, Curtis Yarvin has his own particular philosophy, but I was trying to show in the course of that discussion just one simple idea, which is the way societies used to bind themselves together through controlled violence, what we would call sacred violence. It won't work anymore because Jesus destroyed it. And we're in this weird middle stage where we don't want to do it the way Jesus modeled for us. We don't want to do society the way he modeled. But we also can't go back to the sacrificial pagan way of controlled unanimous belief in sacrificial scapegoating. And so that's something that I think has to be considered if you want to talk about making better societies for the future. Another comment that I wanted to highlight real quick. Scott Talkington says about Walter Williams, he was Thelma Levine's office mate at George Mason when I was there and held a Robinson chair along with Thelma and Hugh Heckley. So that's great, Scott, that you had that connection with Walter Williams. Rest in peace. Another listener, the Magus Train, says many people who consider themselves leftists would be surprised at their own financial backers. I mean, Trotsky, didn't he have a penthouse on Fifth Avenue or something? I mean, in New York, I mean, they're all, corporate fascists, these little communists. And that's the thing that we have to deal with, is these folks don't want to recognize that they are useful idiots for powerful corporations. And I think it's a weird argument because there's this fake capitalism that's always used to juxtapose against the so-called socialism of the left. But those are not really what's on offer by both sides. Fake capitalism is not capitalism, it's corporate fascism. And the democratic socialism is corporate fascism too. They're just varying degrees. Even AOC doesn't want to socialize and communize the whole economy. She wants to pick winners and losers, giant corporations who will make a lot of money, and she'll be the little czar or whatever in her little bureaucratic political role, whatever she imagines. And she'll go to eat at the French Laundry restaurant, and she'll have a bigger house like Uncle Joe Stalin did. I mean, it never works out in some kind of egalitarian, everybody gets the same house, including the czars. It never works out that way, does it? They get to eat at French Laundry. I don't even know if the food's good. I keep giving them so many plugs. Got to go to White Oak Pastures, guys. WhiteOakPastures.com, not French Laundry. I don't know anything about them. But WhiteOakPastures.com, put in neighbor, you get 20% off on grass-fed beef. My goodness, amazing stuff. But when you look at these silly people, they want you to believe I'm just a bleeding heart left-wing person. I just want to progress the world, and maybe some of them really do believe in that. But ultimately, they're possessed by groupthink, and we have to deprogram them. We have to exorcise the foul spirits of groupthink. We have to pull them out of that hive mind contagion that lulls us into a false reality that makes us think it's ever okay to use the state or our own hands to initiate violence against somebody else. This is not about rugged individualism. I critique rugged individualism. This is why we're going beyond the old tired rhetoric of conservative Inc. versus liberal and libertarian, all this stuff. We're going beyond that because I'm not talking about individualism here. I'm talking about personhood, which means we're not islands unto ourselves, but at the same time, we have no right to lay a finger on our neighbor if they're doing things nonviolently that we don't like. You may not like broccoli, but you can't put your neighbor in a cage because he eats broccoli all day. That's a breaking news story for half the country, apparently. Because, they would say that for meat or something, but the point is that the premise behind it, the ethical foundation behind it, is shockingly foreign to a large percentage of the population. So what do? Step one, get out of debt. Stay out of loans. Declare bankruptcy if you have too many personal credit cards, and stay away from the credit system. Step two, control your education. Don't allow your kids to be raised by failing government bureaucrats who eat at French Laundry while you have to eat scraps in McDonald's. And three, well, that's up to you. That's all I have. Think for yourself. Love yourself. How can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? And when you have that, then you have the rest of your life to make a beautiful mess and a creative, exciting life that other people will be inspired. Email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com if you'd like to stay in touch. Godspeed.